Just as we can run our JavaScript through a separate program to minify it, we can also run it through another program to check its quality and to check it for common problems. Now, in contrast to minification, where there are many different tools to choose from, there's one best-known JavaScript code quality checker, which is JSLint by Douglas Crockford, who's the JavaScript architect at Yahoo, and you can find this at jslint.com. With this, what you can do is take some code. I've got a block of JavaScript here. I'm just going to copy, take it over to JSLint, paste it in there, and click this button that says JSLint to check it. Now, when you do this, it's going to complain about a lot. JSLint will point out every little thing you do that isn't perfect. From the amount of white space you use between your operators, to how many characters you indent your code, to whether you declare all your variables using var, whether you're declaring your functions before you use them, and 1,000 other things. I can see that just with this little amount of code, I've got a whole bunch of problems here. Now, these errors have nothing to do with whether or not your code actually works. It might work just fine, and JSLint will still complain about 100 different things in 10 lines of code. This is quite similar that if you take a web page that you know works perfectly well and run it through a formal HTML and CSS validator, you're typically going to find a bunch of things that technically aren't valid. It's kind of the same thing here. And as with HTML and CSS validation, if you take the time and fix all those little things, it will make your code better. But there are a couple of features to be aware of, so to not get frustrated. First off, we look at these errors, but we start at the top and work down. You don't pick and choose ones here. So we're starting off, problem at line 9, character 5, missing use strict statement. Now this is an interesting one. In ECMAScript edition 5, there is something called strict mode. It's an instruction to the browser to not even allow sloppy JavaScript. It requires the use of var for variables. Now JSLint wants us to use strict mode even if we're just writing ECMAScript 3. Now, I could do this in a couple of ways. If I actually added inside my functions just a line, say here, that was use strict inside double quotes and just ended with a semicolon. It looks a little strange here because we're just putting in a string. And that's intentional because ECMAScript 3 doesn't really understand this, and all it's going to see here is a string literal and just ignore it. But the very up-to-date browsers actually do recognize this as trying to enforce strict mode. However, if I click JSLint, what I'll see is, okay, our first error is gone, but if I go down a little bit, I'll probably find it somewhere else. There we go, missing use strict statement if I didn't add that to all my functions. Well, if I know what it's complaining about, what I can do is come down towards the bottom of JSLint, and here I find a whole bunch of options that I can check to allow JSLint to tolerate certain things. And one of them is the tolerate missing use strict pragma, the use strict instruction. So I'm going to check that and click JSLint again. I still have some errors here. The next one. Problem at line 10, character 5. Document was used before it was defined. And then it complains that the line is a document.getElement by ID. Well, this is pretty common stuff. The reason that it's actually doing it here is, as you know, JavaScript was intended for the browser, but isn't always just used in a browser. And the document object only makes sense if we know that we're in a browser. So back down to the options, and I'm checking the one on the left here that says assume a browser. We run JSLint again. We've gotten past that issue, but we've still got problems. This next one here, expected interval handle at column 5, not column 1. What does that mean? Here, it's literally just complaining about the correct level of indentation. If you see that this line beginning interval handle equals is inside our function, but it's not indented the same way that the rest are. It should be indented with 4 spaces. That's what JSLint likes. So if I do that, we run JSLint again, and we go on. Now, quite similar to that, what you'll see is there's a lot of complaints here, missing space between comma and number. It likes us to leave a space after the comma between parameters. Again, we don't have to. This is not going to change how the code works, but it's got its own set of presentational rules. Missing space between current position and the plus equals sign. What it's complaining about there are, for example, things like this line here, where it likes a single space around the operators. Now, what you'll often find is that JSLint will complain about a lot of this. So one of the other options I could do, if I don't want to fix everything right now, is I could allow it to tolerate messy white space. So I'm going to go back and run it again. We're getting smaller here. Problem at line 13, character 34. Animate box was used before it was defined. What does that mean? Well, we're calling this set interval function passing in animate box. The issue is the function animate box isn't defined till later on in the code. Again, while this will work, best practices say that our functions should be defined before we write code that use them. So this function animate box should be defined before I use it in an argument. So what I'm going to do is cut the entire function and just take it up and paste it in here. And then we run JSLint again. And we're getting okay there. We're getting down. Next one, it's saying type confusion, number and string. And the line it's complaining about is this, where we're actually concatenating a number, which is current position, and the string px. Well, in fact, I know this is okay. This is what I want to do. I'm actually trying to create a string that says 200px or 300px. So I'm absolutely fine that that happens. So I need to also go and tell it down here to tolerate type confusion. JSLint. I could just ignore that as well. And now finally we have something here. Problem at line 21, character 9. Something was used before it was defined. And this I just added so we could actually see a problem here. And the problem is that I just start using a variable, something equals something plus 1. Well, this should really have been defined somewhere else with the term var, but it hasn't been defined properly. So I could either delete the line that says something equals something plus 1, or I could go and define the variable up towards the top so it's accessible there, or even somewhere else in the function. And then we have no errors. But as you can see, JSLint will always complain about your code, so try not to be too upset when it complains about every single line that you've written. It is very picky indeed. It's supposed to be picky. That's what JSLint is designed to do. But as you become comfortable with JavaScript, it's a really good exercise to make the effort to understand what it's complaining about, even as what I did, I kind of ignored a few of those errors and told it to be tolerated. At least I understood what its problem was.